Hey everyone, I am just bringing on our other one. Here we go. Okay, fantastic. So we have got everybody here now. Today we are going to have a very fun topic. And thank you guys for joining me. Hey, drop your questions in the comments. I'd be happy to answer any of them. And I know some of you guys are shy and you prefer to contact me afterwards. That is completely okay. I know that not everybody wants everyone knowing their business, and that's fine. So you can feel free to text me, call me, email me, send me a message, whatever you want to do to get your information to me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So today, we are going to talk about the difference between inspections, appraisals, and the final walkthrough and what you should expect. Um, they're all very different and they have very different timelines. And I found from your questions that's a very large question that you have. Not just what are they, but like what are you required to do? What are you required to repair? What are you required to disclose? And the timelines for each one. So let's cover first and foremost the inspection. And the home inspection is not just one thing. It's not just the home inspection. It can also be a wood destroying organism. We call it WDO for short, but wood destroying organism used to be called termite. And now that they have found that there's more damage to a house than just termite, there's like powder post beetles, there's also dry rot. So they've now just called it wood destroying organism. So that may be required. There's also, if you've got a well or if you've got a septic, some people want to do a radon test. Some people want to test the ground for any kind of movement or sinkhole activity. Other people want to test for plumbing. Yes. Is it included in your home inspection? Yes. But the home inspector is not a plumber. And many times people, especially if the house is older with older pipes, they are now requesting that they want to do what they call a scope. They want to put a camera down the tubes and check out the pipes and make sure that the pipes are not corroded, especially when you see an inspection come back with like either a low flow coming out of the faucet in any area or a slow drain. That's always a concern for a buyer of, are there problems with the plumbing? Are the pipes okay? Are they old? Have tree roots grown through them? So is there blockage in there? And so the buyer is able to do any and all inspections that they want to do as long as they're willing to pay for it. Oh, the other one's lead-based paint. So if a buyer wants to order 10 different inspections and pay for 10 different inspections, they're able to do so inside of the inspection period. A lot of times what we'll see is during the inspection period, the buyer may find something that they want to investigate further. And an example of that would be maybe the water heater is making a weird noise and there's corrosion at the top. There's a concern that it might be on its last leg. And so they might want to call a plumber out specifically to look at the water heater and also give them a quote as to what it would cost to replace or repair the water heater. We see that a lot with windows that are very old. If the windows are very old, they will want to get a window person out there to look at the windows and or go ahead and give them a quote on what it's going to cost. Same thing with roofs. Roofs that are old, they'll have a roofer come out and actually look at the roof to give an estimation of how much life is left on the roof as well as a quote. So inspections can be whatever the buyer wants to order and pay for. The buyer is also responsible if any damage is done to the property by that person who's doing the inspection. So, for example, I had represented a seller, and the seller, the buyer that came in was a doctor, is a doctor, and they really wanted to know about some moisture that showed up on the radar behind a wall, and on the backside of it was a closet. And so they paid for someone to come out and open up the closet, the back of that closet, remove the drywall so that they could look at the pipes in there because it backed up to a bathroom to make sure that there was no moisture or mold inside of there. So they paid someone to come out a plumber to come out there and look at that. They paid for someone else to open up the wall, but they also had to pay for a contractor to come out and put all of that back together, paint it, and make sure made it look like it was never even opened. So if you're doing an inspection, you are allowed to investigate, but you have to return the property to the same or better condition than it was before you started your inspections. So as a seller, you're not allowed to deny them and say, well, you can do this inspection, but I'm not going to allow you to do that one. You don't get to do that as a seller. It definitely looks like you're hiding something on there. And I understand that as a seller, you're concerned about like, well, will I have to disclose this? Yes, if they find something and they decide not to go forward, then yes, you are going to be required to disclose. Now, just because you as a buyer find things on the inspection report, it depends on your contract. If your contract states this is an as is contract and you can find out anything you want, it doesn't obligate the seller to have to do anything about it. Okay. Now I'm talking about the state of Florida and I'm talking about the as is contract. So let's say as a buyer, you come in and you find out that the water heater is not working. And you go to the seller and you say, well, the water heater isn't working. I want a new water heater, or I want $1,500 off, or give me $1,500 at closing. And the seller may say to you, no, I'm going to do nothing. They don't have to. You don't have to move forward, but they don't have to give you anything or repair or replace it. They could, and you could say, um, the cost to repair or replace it's 1,500, but instead I'll split it with you and I'll take 750. You can agree on anything you want to agree, or you could agree just to walk away, or you could agree to go ahead and move forward. Maybe the house was already priced knowing fully well that the water heater wasn't working, and so they already priced it very competitively, but you were still just trying to get a few more dollars. I've seen that happen a lot. I'm not upset. It's just what people do. So the inspection, first of all, everybody should do one. Everybody should do an inspection. The inspection period is for the buyer to go through the property and look for things that they could not see when they were there making the offer. Now, if you're a buyer and you come in and you see that there's a chip in the tile, well, you saw that, or you should have seen that. It wasn't hidden when you came through the property and you looked at it. Let me give you a better example. I represent a seller right now, and there's a screen enclosure. And there are portions of the screen that are torn. We live in Florida. We have a lot of tree limbs and activity. So there are sections of the screen that have little tears in there. So an offer was made. It was a very low offer. The seller decided to accept the offer. The buyer came in, did their inspection, and said, lo and behold, oh my gosh, there are tears in the screen, and we are going to need $5,000. The seller said, you saw it when you were here, you knew about it, and we priced it for it. And the buyer said, well, I didn't see it. That's not the seller's fault. Now, it's not the buyer's fault. I mean, kind of, I think it is, but that's just my opinion. You could have seen it if you were there, if you were looking. So the inspection is really to find out things you had no ability to see. Like, I am not a plumber. So if I'm looking at a house and I think it looks good, I'm not going through and testing every wall socket to make sure it works. I'm not turning on the oven and all the burners to make sure it works. I'm not checking the ice maker when I'm there just looking at a house and deciding I want to make an offer. So most people do an inspection to find out the things that there is no way you could have known when you were making your offer, because it's just not in the normal course of walking through somebody's house. And so once you get that inspection report back, you go through and you decide, can you live with it or can you not? And if you can't live with it, you can ask for money or credits or repairs, or you can decide to walk away and say, it's just bigger than I want to have to deal with. I don't care if they're going to give me all this money. I just don't even want to deal with it all. I'm just going to take my offer someplace else. And you're welcome to do that, but that's what the inspection is for. It's to give you peace of mind. It's going to be the best money that you've ever spent. So don't go cheap on something that's going to cost you $400 or $500 because you're trying to save that, and now you're in a situation that's going to cost you 10 or 15 or $20,000. Okay. And when you're doing the inspection, I'm all for not knowing and asking for help or repairs, but also you need to temper that with, is the property already priced for its condition? If the property is lower than anything else on the market because it's already saying, I know I've got problems, and because I know I've got problems and someone else is going to have to deal with the problems, we're already going to price it much lower than anything else is out there. Now, yes, buyers come in and they'll go ahead and take that, and then they'll come in and try to bring it down a little bit more. Like I said, I don't fault anybody for making an effort, but it doesn't mean that the seller has to do anything except for disclose. If the seller and the buyer decide not to go forward, the seller, yes, must disclose the issues with the property for the next buyer. And that does mean even if you fix it. So let's say in this situation, I represented the seller, and during the inspection, they found out that there was a leak in the slab over by the washer and dryer. Had no idea. It wasn't, it wasn't something that was active, but when they were looking around and they saw a little bit of moisture with the moisture reader, they did some further investigation and they were like, oh, you've got an active slab leak. Looks like a pipe, is leaking down there. And so the buyer did not want to deal with it. The seller was willing to take care of it. But like I said, the buyer was just like, no, I don't want to deal with this. I want to move in and I don't want to have to deal with it. So the buyer backed out. The seller went ahead and filed an insurance claim with their insurance company, and the insurance company came out and took care of everything and put down new floors. And the seller asked and said, do I have to disclose? And it was like, yes. Now that's a good disclosure. Okay, that's a great disclosure. You say, hey, look, guess what? We found that there was an active sod leak. We got it taken care of. Here is the bill showing that it is taken care of and there is no more issue. Now, some people are going to say, yeah, but I'm still scared. And that's fine. You can do that. Other people are going to be like, that's fantastic. These people did the okay, so let me stop for a second. I have this little foster kitty. We have three little foster kitties, and this one is needing a lot of attention right now. So if you're wondering what the crying sound is, that's what it is. Um, so in this situation, many people were very excited to know that the home had already been taken care of. The homeowner was very on the spot about taking care of it, full disclosure. And so it is okay if something happens, provided you've taken care of it. But at the end of the day, you absolutely have to disclose. Now, sellers, this is for you. I will say that you may have to take care of it no matter what. And if you've got to take care of it no matter what, sometimes it's best to work with what you've got and go to closing in 2 to 3 weeks versus having that person walk away. And then you've got to put it back on the market and disclose. And then you've got to start the process all over again. Uh, a situation I had, I represented the buyers. The house was vacant. We walked in, it looked amazing. Like it was absolutely the house for them. So excited. During the inspection, the inspector got up there into the attic. I mean, it's not what we did during our walkthrough. Inspector gets up in there in the attic and they find out that there is an opening in the soffit, and a raccoon and its family got upstairs into the attic and decided that that was going to be their new home. And yes, feces and urine everywhere. And so the buyer got an estimate to find out what is it going to cost to take care of this raccoon situation. It was going to cost $10,000. Now I know you might be falling out and being like, "Oh my gosh, that's going to cost $10,000." They had to trap the raccoons and move them out. They had to seal up the opening where they were getting in and out and make sure that there were no other places that they can get in and out. They had to pull all the insulation out of the attic, sterilize and clean the attic, and then they had to blow new insulation in to the attic. And this was a 2,400 square foot house. So it wasn't just grabbing a little family of raccoons and moving them. It was a big ordeal. And the seller had to disclose. Even if they took care of the attic and the raccoons, they were still going to have to tell the next person that this had happened, and they were still going to have to pay the bill. So they weren't going to get out of taking care of the raccoon situation. So the sellers decided that what they would rather do is say, you know what, we'll take care of the raccoon situation, and we'll go ahead and move forward to closing. Buyers were very happy. They didn't care. I mean, they loved the house. The raccoons were going to be taken care of. They were getting all brand new insulation. So the buyers were very, very happy. So it can work out in there. Um, when you're doing your inspections, get them as early in the contract as you can. So if let's say you've got a 15-day inspection period, don't wait till the 14th day to get your inspections done because your inspector is not going to be able to get that report to you the same day. They're most likely going to have to go through the report and take 2 or 3 days to go, 2 or 3 days to get it over to you. You need to go through it. And then if there's any issues that you want to further investigate, you'll need to get those people out there. So I always recommend get the inspection scheduled as soon as you can. So once you get that report back, if there's any issues you've got, and let's say you've got a AC issue and it says it's on its last leg and it's like rattling. And so you decide, oh, you know what? I want to get a quote for AC repair. You've got time. And then that way, if you find out it's on its last leg and it's going to cost $7,500 to get a new AC, then you can negotiate that in there. Also, try to schedule your inspections to be all on the same day, like within a 2-hour window, so that everyone is there and you can be there too. It's great that you get the inspection. It's even better if you're able to be at the inspection or at least come to the tail end of it so that they're done and you can start talking to them. But many inspectors will talk with you on the phone afterwards. So when they send you the report and you want to get on the phone and talk with them and ask them about, page 3 and page 5 and page 50, they will be happy to do that. So you don't have to be there. It's good if you are there so you can see it with your own eyes. But at the end of the day, still go through the report. Now, yes, the next one is the appraisals. All right. Many people incorrectly think that the appraiser is going to do an inspection. Yeah, no, not really. Um, Depends on the kind of appraisal. If it is a VA or FHA appraisal, there are certain things that they absolutely must look for, but it's not an inspection. They're not going through and testing the wall outlets. They're not turning on the water. They're not going and checking what the AC differential is on the intake and the outtake. They're not doing that. They have specific things that they're looking for, like, are there any things around the house that have wood destroying organisms? Or are there like wires exposed that maybe on the outside of the house? We had a situation where there were wires that were sagging and they were kind of a hazard. So the VA appraiser took issue with the wires. Not a big deal. The homeowner just had to secure them to the house because they had fallen down and got sagging. Again, not a big deal, but there are things that they have to look for. Now, as a seller, you may be saying to yourself, well, that's just too bad because the inspection period is over. And that is true. But if you're underneath a VA or an FHA contract, there's a rider in there that says that if something is found by the appraiser for that kind of loan product, then they still can back out because that's a separate rider for that loan product. Now, that doesn't mean if it's like a cash or conventional loan, can you just do that? No, but that's what an appraiser is going to come in and do. So the appraiser is going to come in and they're going to say, you know what, I know that you offered 300,000 on this house, but I am finding that the value of the house is 295. Okay. Well, depends on your kind of contract. Most that are doing financing have a financing contingency in there that says that the buyer must qualify for a mortgage. If you happen to have a buyer that pockets are deep and they can go ahead and qualify for the mortgage without the property appraising, great. But many people have a situation where the buyer would be required to bring the difference. So they're going to have all of their closing costs, they're going to have their regular down payment, and then that $5,000 gap, they're going to have to bring that money on top of everything else. And many buyers just don't have the spread. So let me break that down a little bit more for you. If a house is worth $300,000 or is under contract for $300,000 and a person has an FHA loan and they're going to have to put 3.5% down, and forgive me because I'm not that great with math. So $300,000 house times 3.5%, that means they're bringing 10,500 to the table, okay? They probably have another 10,500 in closing costs, so that means that they're probably around 21,000 that they need to bring to the table, and they probably got, like, 21,005 cents. That's probably all they've got. They might not even have that because they may have asked the buyer for help. So what ends up happening is if the house values at 295, the buyer and seller can agree to change the purchase price to 295. The buyer and seller can agree to go in different directions and say no. The buyer and seller can agree to split the difference. I'm not saying equally. Somebody might say, I'll pay three, you pay two. So you can split the difference in there however you want. But in the situation, if let's say the seller says no and the buyer still wants to move forward with buying the house, then the buyer would have to take 295 because that's the appraisal price, 295 times that by 3.5%, which means you're coming with $10,325 plus the $5,000 difference. So now we've got to add that $5,000 in, which makes it $15,325 before that other $10,000 probably in closing costs. So now they're at 25,000. Many buyers don't have that. So they would not be able to qualify for the loan because they don't have enough money to bring to the table. And now they can get out on the financing contingency. So the appraisal usually, the financing contingency, usually, unless otherwise stated, is about 30 days. So the appraisal is looking for the value of the property. If there's an FHA or VA loan, there will be some conditions that they're looking for as well, especially WDO is one of them. And then if well and septic, they're definitely going to check for well. If it's well water, that's for the house. So they are different, and the appraiser is not looking for inspection items. So buyers don't think that the appraiser is your inspector. That's not what I'm saying. So please understand, appraisal is for the value of the house. Inspector is to make sure that you can live with the conditions that you're living with. So let me know if you guys have got any comments. And like I said, you can communicate with me privately because I know some of you guys are shy. So the next thing is the final walkthrough. Oh, not my favorite thing. The final walkthrough is not an inspection, okay? This is not when you go through the house and you retest the water heater and you start retesting all the outlets. The final walkthrough is to make sure that the home is in the same or better condition than the time you made the contract. And let me give you some examples of that. I had a buyer, and when we made an offer on the property, the pool was blue and the yard was mowed and the house was staged but effectively empty. Okay. He wanted to go by and do the final walkthrough the night before. Not a problem. We got there at 7 o'clock and we go into the house. The lawn is overgrown. Once we went under contract, the seller did not have the lawn mowed anymore. So now the grass is really, really tall. And here in Florida in summer, it like grows in feet overnight. So the grass is really, really tall. The pool is green because they just stopped the pool maintenance. And the staging that was done for the house, when the stagers came and they just put everything together in the boxes, they left all the trash in the garage. The garage was full of boxes, paper, everything, and then the garbage can was overflowing. So that final walkthrough, the buyer said, "No, this is not how I saw the house. This is not the condition the house was in when I made this offer. I am not closing tomorrow until the house is returned to the condition in which I made an offer." Now, I contacted the agent on the other side. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's 7 o'clock at night. The closing is at 9 a.m. Like, you got to know people to get this stuff pulled. And they were like, we'll take care of it. We went back to the house at 8 a.m. in the morning. Pool was green. I'm sorry, pool was blue. Lawn was mowed and all the trash was gone. So you want to make sure the house is in the same or better condition than the day that you saw it. You also want to make sure that if you agree to leave things, they are there. And if things are supposed to be gone, they are gone and no damage has occurred to the property. So, a couple examples of that would be if you agreed that the washer and dryer were going to stay and you pull up to the house for the final walkthrough and there is no washer and dryer, okay, conversation needs to be had. Washer and dryer needs to be returned or delivered, a new one, or monies have to change hand. Same thing if, let's say, the refrigerator is supposed to remain and you find out that the refrigerator is gone. Or uh, I had one where there's a chicken coop at the house. The buyers did not want the chicken coop. So the buyer said, Tammy, that chicken coop's got to be gone on closing day. And so we made sure we wrote into the contract, chicken coop must be gone. And it was. So the chicken coop was gone. Now, you also want to make sure that there's no damage to the property. I always recommend that you do the final walkthrough on the day of closing. Day of closing, because the day before closing, that belongs to the seller and they've got until midnight. It's their house. And if you've moved before, you know sometimes you are still packing up at 10 o'clock at night and cleaning up the house. So if you as a buyer decide to come through at 2 p.m. the day before, very likely the seller is still there. And you won't know if there's damage to the property because your stuff is still everywhere. So I always recommend on the day of closing, 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, that's when you go look at the property. You make sure that there are no holes in the wall, that the movers didn't end up, as they were moving furniture out, damage anything, and that the property is in great condition. And if they agreed to leave stuff, they did. And if they agreed to take stuff, they took it. Other things that can happen are has nothing to do with the seller. We had a situation on the day of closing. The night before, a massive storm ripped through town and tree limbs and everything down everywhere. And this was just unfortunate. The tree over the shed in the backyard lost a branch and crushed the roof. That was not the buyer's problem. The buyer doesn't hasn't closed yet. That's not their problem. The sellers still own the house, and that's not the condition that the shed roof was when they made an offer. So was it unfortunate for the seller? Yes, it was very unfortunate because had they closed a day earlier, that would not have been the seller's problem. But they didn't, So the seller and the buyer came to terms that the seller was just going to go ahead and give them some money so that they can close in 2 hours. So other things that have happened are pipes burst, especially in older homes. And so there was another situation in which when they came in for the final walkthrough, they were standing ankle deep in water because the pipes had burst overnight. No one's fault. Nobody did anything wrong. But had they not gone to the final walkthrough the day of closing and just went straight to the closing, when the buyer got there, that would have been the buyer's problem, not the seller's, because it's the buyer's obligation to do a final walkthrough before closing. So if you do your final walkthrough a week in advance and then you come in and say, oh my gosh, I've got a problem, mm, no, you're not going to have a leg to stand on. So I recommend to you, you do the final walkthrough on the day of closing, like an hour or two before you close, depending on, where your closing office is in relation to the property. But it is not time to go, hey, Bob, did you see this chip in the countertop? And then you want to start renegotiating then. That's inspections have passed. So that would be different if, let's say, I'm trying to think of one that happened. Um, Maybe the ice maker stopped working. We did have a situation where when we went in, the ice maker did stop working. The refrigerator just stopped working and there was water all over the floor on there. Again, nobody's problem. The inspection period was over. So was the owner technically responsible for the appliance that was no longer working? No. But was it worth killing the deal over a refrigerator that they were going to have to probably take care of anyway? So use some common sense in that situation. It's not the time to start nitpicking over little things that were taken care of in the inspection period. It's about making sure that the property is being delivered to you in the condition that it's supposed to be delivered to you under the terms that you guys agreed to, and that things are not missing in there. Um, So let me see if there's any other questions on that. I would be curious to know, drop it in the comments, what you guys have found in your inspections. What were the deal killers in your inspections that came up? Or if you didn't do an inspection and you kind of wish you did, how that worked out. And of course, the best stories are always the final walkthrough. Did you do one? Did you find out that there were problems after? Or were you lucky enough that you were able to find those problems beforehand and take care of it before you got to the closing table? So let me know how that worked out for you. And as always, send me your questions and your stories. I think they're absolutely fantastic. You guys have the best experiences. Would always happy to talk with you about those. Hold on one second. We did get a comment in there. Thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate that. Um, and let me look. I did get some notes I was taking the other day. Man, it's been busy. You guys have been having a lot going on. Um, okay. Inspections. Let me go over this with you. Somebody, when I was talking to them, they said this. They bought a house online, and I get that. I get that there are many people that are unable to come to the area, or maybe you've already been to the area, but you didn't find the house of your dreams. And then afterwards, when you left, a house in the neighborhood popped up, and you were like, "Oh, I've seen the neighborhood. I'm familiar with the area. I like the area. I'll go ahead and buy that house." That's what they did. So they bought a house online, had never seen this house, and the photos in there were very limited. And so they didn't realize until after they closed on the house, because they didn't even come for the final walkthrough or the closing. They closed on the house. And when they came to the house weeks later, is when they discovered that the primary bathroom only had one sink. For most people, that's not an issue. For them, they just wanted two sinks. They didn't know that the builder in that specific floor plan only put one sink in the primary bathroom. So they, of course, they're upset. They felt like maybe they were tricked or deceived. And, you know, you got to do your due diligence. This is where, if you can't come, have your agent do a video walkthrough of the property and just go very slow. Look through the video, make sure that you can see things. And I try to make sure that they're home when they do that, or they can see. So they could say, go in a little bit closer to this, or pan up or pan down, because I want to see this area, so that even if you can't be there, you can see what's going on. If not that, then get photos. Like I said, the property had very limited photos. So it would have been good to go through and take a bunch of photos of that. They probably would have discovered at that time it was one sink in there. This also works in your inspection. Remember, I was talking to you about your inspection. If you can't be there, then the agent can do the video for you and or take some photos of the property at that time. And also for the final walkthrough, if for some reason you are not going to be able to be there for the final walkthrough, your agent absolutely should go through there. And let me tell you a story on that. I represented a seller, and the seller said, "We're going to move out a week ahead of time. The movers are going to come through and they're going to pack up the house for us." And I said, "Okay, no worries." I told the agent on the other side, sellers are moving out a week ahead of time. So, you can do your final walkthrough whenever you want. Not an issue. Closing was on Friday. Didn't hear anything. I'm thinking, okay, that's fine. Saturday, the agent calls me and they send me photos. This place is trashed. Yes, I represented the seller. It's trashed. And the agent said, "Oh my gosh, look at this property." And I said, "Did you not do a final walkthrough?" And they said, "No, I thought it was taken care of." And I, you know, seller had no responsibility at this time. We had closed, but I did contact the seller and I said, "Hey, listen, can you kind of just help me understand and explain what's going on here?" And she said, "Yeah, we moved out a week ahead of time, just like I told you, and the movers came through and moved our stuff." Well, the movers aren't cleaners. So, yeah, they packed up what they were instructed to pack up, and whatever they were not instructed to pack up, like everything in the fridge that is now rotted, they left behind because they're not cleaners. And I called the other agent and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm sorry to tell you, if you had done the final walkthrough and I had these photos, we could have negotiated compensation to the buyer for having to clean the property because this is not the way they saw the property and the condition it was supposed to be delivered in. The buyer absolutely would have been compensated. Something would have been worked out. But because you didn't, and this deal is closed, it is done. There's not the only thing that can happen now is suing them, and it's not worth suing them for that amount of money. So it was a hard lesson learned by the agent, unfortunately. Also, a lesson for me because that's when I was like, this is absolutely why you do a final walkthrough on the day of closing. This is 100% why you do that, and why, if you're going to buy a property sight unseen, somebody puts eyes on it for you. Okay, somebody. Um, what were some of the other issues on here? Open house, after showings, agent commissions. Hmm. You know what's been a big one? I know this isn't our topic today, but if you guys want to talk about it, let me know. Okay. All right, you do? Okay. All right. This one has definitely been a topic that has come up with many, many, many people. And this is, some will call it dual agency, and others will call it transaction agent. It depends on your state on what you're going to call it. Now, I am in Florida. So in Florida, we have transaction agent. We do not do dual agency. In other areas, they call it dual agency. So I'm going to call it transaction agent because that's what we call it in Florida, and I'm in Florida. So transaction agent, it is somebody who represents both sides. And the comment that I had from so many people that I've been talking to, because a lot of you guys are calling me to help you find an agent to list your house and also help you buy in another area. And the one thing that you're telling me is you are not comfortable and happy or open to an agent that is representing both sides because you don't feel that you can trust them. And I get it. I 100% get it because not all agents, I'm sorry, they're not all great. But that's every industry. It's like not all restaurants are great, not all professionals are great, right? But that doesn't mean everyone's bad. But I understand in our industry, there's many people not to be trusted. So how does it work out if you have an agent that's representing both sides? In Florida, it is supposed to be that you do not share information with either side that will harm them. Now, here's an example. If I have a seller and the seller says to me, I must sell this house at any cost. So we put $300,000 on there, but they're like, you know what? I have to sell this. I will take 200,000 tomorrow. I know that, but I can't use that information and hurt them because if I can get them 300,000, I need to get them 300,000. So now a buyer calls me and they say, "Hey, I'm standing outside the house. I'd like to see it this weekend. Can you come over and show me the property? I don't have anybody representing me." I say, "Sure. I'm going to come over." I show them the property. I say, "You don't have anybody representing you." And they're like, "Yeah, you can be the one representing me." And then they give me information and they say, I love this house. I actually live down the street. I would have paid $400,000 for this house. I'll pay anything just to live in this home because it was the favorite home on the block. Well, see, now I know this person will take 200. This person will pay up to 400. And no, you cannot share that information. But what do you do? What you do is you take the market data and you say to the seller, this is what the market is doing. This is the value of the property. And this is what is reasonable to get. This is the offer you've received. Now, would you like to accept the offer as it is? Would you like to tell them to get lost? Would you like to counter them at a higher number and see what they have to say? And you do the exact same thing with the buyer. You tell them, this is what's going on in the market. This is what houses are closing for in this area. This is a good number. What do you want to offer? And then the buyer will decide, I want to offer a higher number because I want to make sure I get the property, especially if there's a bidding war. Or no, I want to go with a low ball number because I want to see how much I can save, or I'll do whatever I have to do to get the property. Each party gets information that is accurate and true that can be proven, but they don't get your opinion. Okay. They don't get, well, I think you should go for more because they'll give you more. And you don't go, I think you'll go for less. You don't do that. No, you don't play the two sides against each other. That is so wrong. And I will, I'll just leave it at that. You get fair representation to both sides. You have information that you can document, and you allow them to make the best decision for them without your opinion in there. And I understand it's a difficult place to be in because what happens is they go, what would you do? I really want this house. What number would you offer? Or I really need to sell the house. What number would you accept? Again, it's not my opinion. Okay. I am not buying or selling this house. I don't have a dog in this fight. So my response is this: I am not buying or selling this house. I'm not paying the mortgage. I'm not moving into it. This is going to be your home or selling the home. You've got to come up with a number that you can sleep with and be okay with yourself. And if that number, let's say you lowball it and somebody else gets it at $5,000 more and you're okay with that, then that is the right number. But if you're going to cry yourself to sleep every night for the next 10 years and we're all going to have to live with it, then you need to offer whatever it is that you truly feel in your heart is the number that you can live with if you got it or lost it. So don't offer too much if you're going to feel like, oh no, I've overpaid, but also don't offer too little if you feel like, dang it, I've lost it. I would have paid that much, because that's the number that you've got to give. Same thing on the selling side. If you lose that buyer and now you're really, really upset for the rest of your life, then that probably wasn't the right number. And at the end of the day, only you can make that decision. Only you. Okay. So I get that there's a lot of people out there that, yes, I've seen those agents that are, offer this much or take that much. And that's not what you deserve. And that's not what should be happening in there. But that is why it has happened. And that is why many buyers and sellers are like, I don't want you representing the other side. If I'm going to hire you, you're only going to work for me. And that is fair. And so on a listing side, if I've got a person that says, "Hey, I only want you to work for me," and the buyer comes in and says, "Hey, will you work for me?" The answer is no. I've already said to the seller, I'm only working for them. My contract says I'm only working for them. I can recommend a few agents to you if you like, if you don't already have some choices, or if you've already got some other options, select somebody and have them bring the offer over. And then that way, each party can feel that they are truly, truly represented. Now, this is a very I find it can be very challenging depending on who is involved. And if I have someone who's like, no, I want you to represent both sides because nobody knows the property better than you. No one would paint it in the same light as you. And so I think that you're going to be the best one to represent the property, either for buyer and seller. But sometimes I have a person who I know has been burned and they're not very trusting. And so even if they don't care, I know, and I will say, you know what, this is just going to be too complicated, just way too complicated. And it will be best that you have your own representation. Like even if they allow me to do it, I don't want to do it because don't, I don't want to be placed in that position. And so I will listen to what my customer says, and then I will look at the situation and decide, what is best, even if I've got permission to do so on there. And then there are some times when I represent the listing side, I don't want to represent the buyer. I feel like the buyer, yeah, no, no, I'd rather just work with the seller on there. But you get the right to make that decision. Whether you're selling because it's your house, you get to call the shots, or you're buying and you're hiring a representative, so you get to make the call on whether you want them to represent just you or if you're going to allow them to represent the other side as well. So pick wisely. I think there are strong agents out there that can do it. I know I can do it. Doesn't mean I always want to do it, but not all agents can. And you've got to kind of get that feeling with them on if you feel that there's somebody who is going to be able to be tight-lipped about the situation and keep the deal going forward in the best interest of all parties on there. So yeah, I heard you guys on that one. And so let me see if there's any other questions. That was awesome. So thank you guys. Definitely join me next week. I have so much fun with you. And yes, please continue to send me your questions and your emails. You guys have the best stories. I'm going to actually take a compilation of a lot of the comments that are in the videos because every time I'm reading the comments, and I do read them, there are a lot. I do read every single one of them, and I personally answer every single one of them. And that is why it's taking me so long to get through them because I do have a full-time job and career, and I do have family. And so I'm getting to them if I haven't got to them yet, but I do pull out some of the best ones that I'm going to make a compilation video. And that's also where I get a lot of my questions to have with you guys on the comments there. So thank you. I will see you guys next week. And, invite your friends. Let's make it a party. All right. Bye.